Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co host, Nick Olson. Nick, it's been so long since we've been able to get on together. I'm excited to do this today.
I am alive.
Yeah.
Good to be back. Good to be back. And this is a fun time of the year. Obviously, it's sucky end of the season, but this is like that's long history now. It's a bright new morning. We're forward to free agency.
hmm
We're looking forward to the draft. So excited to get back in your pod feed and dive into what the Vikings might do in free agency because they have um, I would argue maybe one of the most interesting free agency paths ahead of them because two of the top 10, I'm going to say, free agents in this NFL class are both former Vikings and Danielle Hunter and Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
So Kirk Cousins is probably the number one free agent considering how important the
Well,
quarterback
really,
position.
after all the franchise tags and that, it's two of the top five, I feel like. I really don't feel
Yeah.
like there's guys outside of them that are that significant in this class.
Yeah, and just overall strategy, like Kwesi has been kind of pussyfooting a little bit with are we tanking? Are we not tanking? Are like it's a competitive rebuild? Is that
Yeah.
can you be both competitive and rebuilding? And I feel like this offseason is going to really give us a sense of like, are they tearing it down to the studs? Are they rebuilding? Are they going to run it back? And what they do with Kirk and if they bring back Kirk and Hunter, that looks like kind of more of the same. They're gonna, they'll shed some of the lighter weight guy. But if they and it's possible they move on from both, then we're looking at a completely different team. And that's not to say they're not going to try and win, but they're probably going to, if they move on from Cousins, they're probably targeting a rookie quarterback. In which case, it's a very big the whole trajectory of the team. I think gets decided in the next week or so. So that's why it's kind of an exciting time to dive in and try and talk about what they might do and what we think they should do with this big free agency class.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like we're reaching kind of the decision point here, right? We're recording this on a Saturday. Monday is when the tampering window starts. So it's really getting close to when we're going to have answers for all this. The last couple weeks, since the Super Bowl, basically nobody's had anything to talk about but what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins or Danielle Hunter kind of on Vikings Twitter. And I feel like it's built up a lot of pent up anxiety about it. So I'm glad that we're going to get to the end of that eventually. And it's an interesting decision point too, because both are older players for their position, right? Danielle's almost 30. I think he's still got some good years left, but it's a question if the Vikings, don't see themselves as immediately competitive, like you can see them wanting to move on from both of those guys, right? If they don't think, oh, this is the path we're going to win the Super Bowl. But it puts our roster in a really scary spot if that doesn't happen, right? Because you have two of the most important positions that we're letting go. So let's jump into it and get to the Kirk Cousins conversation, right? Because there's three paths. Well, really, there's four paths, but there's three paths that I think have any sort of validity at all, right? For Kirk, and that's the Vikings sign him to a long term extension and make him their quarterback, for until he retires, basically, right? They're like, we want to go with Kirk. We think that's okay and roll with it. And that's kind of maintaining the status quo that we've had the past, what has it been, 6 years now that he's been with the team. There's try to sign Kirk to a short-term deal, which is what all the reporting seems like. It sounds like they're trying to do. If but Kirk wants more guarantees than that, and try to draft a rookie, right, and have him develop a year under Kirk. Let Kirk walk and draft that rookie and throw him into the fire right away. Or I guess the fourth option is try to bring in another starter from the outside, right, who's already in the NFL, maybe like a Russell Wilson or Baker Mayfield or something like that, and try to make that work. Or like I saw this article or was posted, and it was from some guy at the Athletic, Zach Rosenblatt or something, I think, where he put starting quarterbacks for all the teams, and it was like trying to put the pieces together, right? And the Vikings kind of got the short end of the stick on that, and we got Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson as our quarterback plan, which is pretty ridiculous, right? Like that. So I don't really see an outside starter like having the same level of quality as Kirk, and at that point, I don't want to go to acquire an outside starter. So that's kind of that decision would be a non-starter for me if we're not also drafting a quarterback right in the first round. But kind of what's your preferred path there in terms of what we do with Kirk Cousins or what we let him walk?
I think it's hard for me to feel super strongly not knowing his injury status. And I feel like that's kind of a big thing. Like it's his right Achilles. We don't know if he's going to be ready for week one. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
if he's going to be ready for camp or OTAs. Probably not OTAs. And like that's his, you plant on that foot. So it's hard to be a good quarterback if you can't like step into your throw or like plant into your
Yeah.
throws or whatever. Um, so. depending on his medicals, and he's going to be 36. He's I like Kirk, and if I had my druthers, I think give him like 2 years, $40 million is like like what PFF projects his contract. I would sign him to that. I'd be happy to sign him up to that because I do think it gives you a lot of flexibility to win with a rookie core. I think the number one priority for this team this offseason is answer the long term at quarterback. But I also think you don't want to necessarily throw your quarterback into the fire. And I think it can be very beneficial to the success of your future your future franchise quarterback to have somebody to study under. I mean, we saw how important that was with Patrick
Hmm.
Mahomes. We saw how important that was with Jordan Love coming out this season. Obviously, we've also seen teams throw their quarterback into the fire. Josh Allen probably might not be the quarterback he is today if they didn't have him just sort of trial by fire, learn on the fly, and go with the highs and lows with him. So you can do it both ways, but I think in particular if you're looking at one of these like raw, moldable upside quarterbacks like JJ McCarthy, or even like I wouldn't say Drake May's a project, but like he's got a ways to go and he's got a lot of things to work, like just fundamental. Like Drake May's footwork needs to be cleaned up. Who's a really good person to like just like perfect tape study
Follow
footwork is
footwork,
Kirk
yeah,
Cousins.
Kirk Cousins.
So, so I mean, I get people who want to move on because they're like, why do you want to flush $80 million in cap space down the toilet? Like the whole point of getting a rookie on a cheap rookie quarterback is so you can free up that money. And if you re-sign Kirk, you're not freeing up that money. I think the converse to that is, put your quarterback your rookie quarterback in the best position to succeed. That means having somebody like Kirk Cousins above you so that you're ready to take the reins, and it also gives you like if the rookie doesn't work out, you can still be competitive with Kirk Cousins. And it also gives you a lot more flexibility and optionality. We saw what the Eagles did with Sam Bradford and Carson Wentz. They got to a point where they felt like Carson Wentz was ready to take over, and they were able to trade Sam Bradford to the Vikings for a first round pick. And a first round pick, maybe you're not getting that for Cousins, but if you trade him mid-season for a second round pick, which I think is doable, that's a lot better than hypothetically maybe a compensatory third round pick 2 years down the road if Cousins, qualifies, plays the, not representative number of snaps, all that other stuff. So I would try and come to the table with Kirk. I am willing to, waive the no trade clause because I don't feel like I don't actually. If you say to Kirk,
Yeah.
look, we're trading you to Atlanta, I don't actually think Kirk's gonna like be on full on veto because like it's like saying we're gonna if your boss told you he was gonna fire you, you couldn't be like, no, I'm still coming into work. Like that's not a
Yeah.
tenable situation. So yeah, I'd be willing to make some compromises. I do think it would set up the team to succeed. I would not go above $40 million a year, and I would not go above 2 years. But I wouldn't mind signing him to 2 years because I feel like that gives you a trade asset to move to his next team. So sorry to monologue and to probably take a little bit of your thunder there, Matt. But that's kind of I'm open to bringing Kirk back, dependent on his medicals. I do think it would set up the rookie quarterback to succeed, but number one priority is get a rookie quarterback. And if the option is Kirk or a rookie, I'm going with the rookie without Kirk. Without Kirk.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. And Greg and I talked about this on the last episode we did a little bit. So, I've gotten a little bit of conversation off on this. I think, ideally, to your point, the key with me is I don't want Kirk to have significant guarantees going into year two. Like if we give him $80 million over 2 years and guarantee him 50 million or something, and we only have to take a $10 million dead cap hit, in that second season, I'm okay with that. But if we have to guarantee 20 or 30 or 4 or the entire contract, right, which is Kirk's standard and what he wants into that second season, that concerns me a lot more. Um, and in terms of a trade thing, like we need to make sure that Kirk is going to be willing to take a trade, and fully guaranteeing his contract makes that more difficult, right? Like so for me, that's where the situation is, right? It sounds like Atlanta really wants to add Kirk Cousins right now. If they're willing to go over the guarantees that the Vikings are, I would be fine with letting Kirk walk because, like you said, my preference is to have Kirk and a rookie on a short term deal, is number one. Then have the rookie. It's not Kirk, it's the rookie, right? Then probably three Kirk for a long term deal just because wading into the waters of everything else that's out there in free agency or across the NFL landscape at quarterback, I just don't like any of the guys, right? And I think honestly, not signing Kirk or drafting a rookie early. And the hard part is we're picking 11, right? If we were picking number one overall, it's not an issue. If we were picking in the top three, it's not an issue. You really have to commit and have a guy that you like at 11 that you think is feasible for you to actually get at that point, which is another concern for me with the Vikings, right? Like they need to have a pathway to get a guy, and that's not. I'm not saying that they should try to trade up to 3 today, right before the Kirk decision is made. I don't think there's really all that much of a value difference, but like they need to figure it out. And I don't want to get stuck drafting Christian Ponder at 11 because we decided, oh, we need a quarterback, but there weren't any other valid options on the market, right? Like I think that's a major concern there. So I do want to lean towards keeping Kirk, but it's a hard question, right? Because you don't want to overcommit to that at the same time. So we'll see in the next couple days. I think is kind of where I've gotten to on it, right? Like I want to trust the Vikings decision makers because they've done some good things so far. And I think the team was better than its record last year, right? Obviously, when Justin Jefferson is out for half the season and Kirk Cousins misses more than half the season, they were a playoff team before he got hurt, and they beat, the 49ers. They were playing really, really good football. So I think the front office and the coaching staff has earned the benefit of the doubt to do what they want and decide is best at quarterback, and we'll see what goes on from there.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I would say is I'm not as fussed about the guarantees if I'm thinking about it as like this is a trade asset because the guarantees would go to the team that trades for him. But that probably does make him less valuable as a trade asset if the team is like, oh, what if Kirk gets injured again? What if he sucks? I'm not too worried about like Kirk sucking because he plays the style of quarterback that ages well.
Yeah.
He's not reliant on his athleticism, and he's the kind of weirdo like Tom Brady, where I feel like he's going to continue to be a good
Mm-hmm.
pocket passer into his late 30s. So, but yeah, that I can understand where you wouldn't necessarily want to give him, a fully guaranteed, $80 million contract over 2 years. So
I do
we'll see
think
what happens.
to me, if like we have him 40 million guaranteed and he has a no trade clause, that does come into play a little bit because he can say no to where he wants to go to. And if he's complete dead weight, he can kind of screw the Vikings over at that point. Where like let's say he gets injured again, right? And it's bad and it really sucks. But the Vikings will owe him $40 million on the cap. Well, they could do some Moneyball stuff, right? Like the Browns did with like the Texans did with Brock Osweiler, to spend some assets to kind of get out of that cap hit without a no trade clause. So like, it's either guarantees or a no trade clause to me. I think is what I'd be willing to give Kirk. Um, so yeah, let's move on to the next question. Right, that's Kirk Cousins. Kirk has been rehashed 5 million times over the past years, so maybe this is the last 10 minutes we'll ever spend on him as a Viking. But like, that's kind of where we stand right now. So the next one I have is obviously the second biggest question is Danielle Hunter, and let's say everybody else got franchise tag basically on the high end of the market. I think the second best pass rusher or the best all around player is Jonathan Grenard. Maybe Bryce Huff is in there, but from the guys I'm naming, they don't nearly have the cachet that Danielle Hunter has, right? So he's getting $20+ million a year on a contract, maybe let's say up to $25 million. Are you willing to pay that for a 29-year-old Danielle Hunter, that $25 million a year? And if not, kind of where do you want to go?
Yes, and re-signing Hunter is my number one priority in free agency. I think that's the most important thing. I mean, he's an elite player. I think there are some people who underrate him for some reason. It's kind of weird because he's had like double-digit sacks every year of his career, other than when he missed a full
Yeah.
year. Just an exceptionally talented pass rusher who's also elite at stopping the run, setting the edge, locking out, collapsing gaps in. And a tremendous gives you snaps and snaps and snaps in plays a heavy snap rotation. Don't have to rotate him out. So just a very valuable player. And for some reason, maybe it's like he doesn't score well on ESPN's pass rush win
Yeah,
rate, which
I
I
think
think is
it's the underlying
silly. But
metrics, right? Like a lot of people, and it's very valid that sacks aren't necessarily a great measure of your success as a pass
oh,
rusher, right? Like total pressures matter a lot. ESPN's pass rush win rate, I think, does matter. But we've talked about it for years. Like Hunter has never scored well on ESPN's pass rush win rate, yet he's consistently productive. So I think there's obviously something that it's missing, right? With his rush style just being a little bit slower. And I bet you he like leads the league in pressures between like 2.5 and 2.7 seconds or something like that, right? And
he's not the best snap timer, which
no,
is that's a fair thing to hold against him. He's not Myles Garrett in terms of just like blink of an eye. He's crossed the line of scrimmage. But like it doesn't make the pass rush win rate. I don't mean to go on this diatribe again, but like cutting off the system
yeah,
for pressures after 2.5 seconds is nonsense. I can understand winning faster is better, but I don't understand winning after 2.5 seconds is worthless. Like to me, that's not a good model if you're just ignoring everything that happens because most sacks and pressures happen after 2.5 seconds anyway. So
Yeah. And the
I
other
don't
thing
like.
is with the Vikings' current defense, right? Like they blitzed a ton this past year, and generally blitzing helps pass rushers, right? Like generally, if you're blitzing, it'll help pass rushers get sacked. The Vikings approach, like just for watching it, right? Just for the experience of watching it every single week, either forced the opponent to get the ball out faster or wasn't necessarily targeting Danielle Hunter. Now, there were rushes where we targeted Danielle Hunter and basically were like, all right, Danielle, you have the advantage to win on this play, right? But I think a majority of the blitzes weren't doing that. And I think that context is lost when you have a national media who's looking at things and saying, generally, blitzing helps individual pass rushers, right? Like, but there's a context of the way the Vikings were blitzing. I really don't think it helped Danielle Hunter all that much in terms of his overall production. Like, I think it hindered his pressure production, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, just sorry to be snarky about it, but just watch the tape. If you don't think Hunter is a
Yeah.
good player, just watch his tape and because it's so obvious. Like even on his bad games, it's so obvious. Like just watching his tape, he's such a good player at all phases
Mm-hmm.
of what you want in your edge rusher. He's a blue chip talented edge rusher. Even at 30, I mean, PFF was projecting him at like $21 million a year over 3 years. Like that's to me, that's a crazy bargain for an elite.
Yeah.
Maybe okay, maybe elite is because I wouldn't put him up with Myles Garrett or the Boza brothers or whatever. But like for a guy who's top 10, arguably top five, I think that's a bargain. So yeah. And by the way, I think the other reason it's my number one priority is because if you're not getting pressure with Danielle Hunter, who are you getting pressure with on your team?
Literally
Because it's not
nobody.
Harrison Phillips, it's
Literally
not Dean
nobody.
Lowry. If you can't build a defense out of blitzing Josh Metellus every day, who's a great blitzer, but like you need to have pass rushers to win in the NFL. You do. So you probably need two hunters.
Mm-hmm.
You want to sign like a second guy, but retaining Hunter to me is my number one priority, and the team's not going to have a pass rush without him. I don't want to live through Shamar Stephen as our number one pass rusher again.
Yeah, no. And the hard part here, right, is the Vikings need to make the decision on Hunter and Kirk because of the way kind of the salary cap and bonus proration works. They probably need to make it before Wednesday, right, which is when both of their contracts void. Now, I did a cap exercise where I was able to re-sign them in a way that elevated their cap hit compared to what it would be if they were just let walk. So I think you can do that, and you can use cap magic, right, by giving them a big signing bonus and minimizing the salary year one, where you are going to increase their cap hit on you, but you're going to get rid of the dead cap for 2025, so you could just kind of push new money into 2025, right? So I think there is a strategy, but I think the way Kwesi is kind of going to look at it is if they aren't willing to come back by Wednesday, they're probably going to walk. So in the scenario where we're not able to re-sign Danielle Hunter, do you have anything, and I might be asking this off of the top of your head, I'm not sure, do you have any edge rushers on the market that you're like interested in, or any guys from depth guys, or we're going to need another edge rusher anyway, right? Like we don't have, the other ones on our roster are Patrick Jones and Andre Carter. So who are you kind of thinking about adding in free agency there?
It's not an edge rusher, but I feel like if you're not going to spend the $25 million a year on Hunter, you got to throw it at Wilkins and hope you can land him. And I know it's
Boom.
not the same
Yep.
position, but you have to have a pass rusher, and ideally you'd get both of them. But if you can't have Hunter, I would try and throw that money at Wilkins because to be honest, the other edge rushers on the market are not you're not going to get a top 10 edge rush production out of it. Maybe Chase Young if you get this reclamation project, but I wouldn't. I mean, he came on strong for the 49ers, but I think he's like your 1B kind of guy. So that's somebody, we're like, some people are really high on Greenard. We could try running it back with Zadarius Smith again. Andrew Van Ginkel, reuniting him with Brian Flores. These are all guys that are like intriguing, but they're not going to be your third down, that you got to have it kind of guy. Those are your guys who are going to feast off to Hunter taking up double teams and stuff. So I would like a lot of those guys as like your second guy.
Yeah.
But I feel like they're the only a guy who you could make the argument for is Wilkins. But to me, Hunter's on a different tier of player than Wilkins. So that's kind of why re-signing Hunter is such a big priority for me because I feel like the substitute player is a significant step down in quality. So,
And Wilkins is going to get 25 a year, is what it sounds like. Matabuike signed for 24 a year, and everything I saw from people was Wilkins is going to surpass that, probably because he is able to hit the open market, right? And just by nature of being second in terms of getting a contract, you have an advantage because your agent will point at this contract and say beat that. Um, so no, it's definitely an interesting conversation. I think there are a couple trade candidates that would interest me as Hunter replacements. If the Vikings aren't able to keep them, the Eagles' Josh Sweat apparently is on the trading block or got permission to look at trades. I've always loved Josh Sweat, so he would be exciting to me. But again, you still need that second answer, right? I do like the idea of bringing in a Van Ginkel who has experience in the system. Chase Young definitely feels like a Kwesi kind of play, right? Somebody who is highly touted, is a buy low option, a Marcus Davenport level option. I wouldn't be too offended by bringing Marcus Davenport back. I feel like people have a bad reaction to that immediately, but and that's bringing Marcus Davenport back for like $5 million, right? I'm not talking about giving Marcus Davenport another $13 million to probably be injured all year, but I thought he played really well when he did actually play. So, bringing somebody
He's a
like
good
him
player when
back,
he's healthy. He's a
yeah,
good player. It's a bet that didn't work out, but that doesn't mean it's not going to work out either. So yeah, I like him as an option too. You just can't rely on him.
yeah. The problem is like the guys who might be available to trade are way more interesting to me, right? Like Brian Burns is interesting to me, but the Panthers are probably going to want the world for him, so I just can't see that happening. Josh Sweat, I don't know what the Eagles want. If you can get him for a fourth round pick and like a future third or something like that, like because I would be like right now I would trade the Vikings third round pick for Josh Sweat, but they don't have a third round pick. So like it's kind of one of those questions. So no, it's definitely an interesting thought process there. I think the next thing, like offensive line, actually, real quick, I'm fine with just trying to bring Risner back. I don't know what that price tag is. Do you want to like make a splash outside of Risner, or are you just fine with him?
I kind of like the continuity. I felt like the continuity helped the Vikings offensive line play better than we're used to seeing them this
Mm-hmm.
past year. And I think Chris Cooper does a better job with guys as he's getting additional years out of these guys. You've seen a lot of progress from a lot of these guys. So I would try and bring back Bradbury and Reisner. I think they are fine. I think you're looking at some of the contracts that are getting handed out, like what did Ezra Cleveland get, like 15 million a year or something crazy like
Yeah.
that, so, or 10 million. So I don't want to go back to that where we're like, yeah, Reisner and everybody, they're not like world beaters, but like they're fine and fine is good enough. And we've got other priorities where we got to spend. So I'm not looking to make a big splash in offensive line free agency.
Yeah, Cleveland got like 9 a year from the Jags, I think, and it's a weak link position, so just don't be terrible. And I think Reisner met the don't be terrible kind of threshold there last year. So the next one I kind of jumped on that question is running back, right? We cut Alexander Madison. That actually saved us a significant amount of cap space, almost $4 million, I believe, which makes all the sense in the world. He wasn't a quality starter. The problem is, I don't believe Ty Chandler is a quality starter either, so we're kind of left without a starting running back, in my opinion. What are you willing to invest in running back? Would you go, trust the draft, right? Like, let's say a fourth round pick in the draft because the Vikings, again, don't have a third round pick. Would you say, I want to go for a low tier free agent like a Zach Moss, or do you want to make a splash like the Josh Jacobs or Saquon Barkleys of the world?
I mean, I really like Saquon Barkley, and I think Josh Jacobs is also a really great runner. So, or like even like a Derrick Henry, who's 30, but
Yeah.
he's such a good zone runner, so he's a really good fit for the system too. He doesn't bring much in the passing game, obviously, but like who cares when he's such an efficient and talented zone runner? So those guys are all really exciting. My analytics brain kind of turns on and tells me like no, these guys do not make a difference. But then watching film, I'm like, actually, watch Christian McCaffrey on film, and then watch, Alexander Madison and Ty Chandler and everybody who, no offense to them, but like clearly it does. Like there's a difference in the running back talent. So I would not probably invest in that top tier. Like I'm not willing to spend $10 million per year on a running back. But this is such a deep class that like you could probably get a Tony Pollard for cheap, who I think didn't have the best of seasons with the Cowboys, but like he doesn't have a lot of tread on his wheels. Somebody like DeAndre Swift, who has his problems, but also like in terms of his vision being below average, but everything else is like exceptional. Like those guys kind of excite me. You could even get like an AJ Dillon, as like your thunder to your lightning if you're going to keep the current guys around. So there's a lot of different ways you could go. I'm probably looking more at like the Zach Moss tier of guys than the Saquon guys. Although part of me is like, how cool would it be to have like a rookie quarterback handing it off to Saquon and throwing to Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson and Jordan Addison? Like that's a really fun, exciting offense with blue chip talent at like pretty much every skill position outside of the quarterback. So that would be really fun. But I think they're probably bigger priorities for where to spend our money in free agency.
Yeah, to me, running back's a little bit of a luxury. So if I were gaming out the Vikings' perfect free agency, right, like I'd end up getting a Zach Moss or somebody of that caliber. Like maybe take a flyer on any Antonio Gibson or something like that, and that's kind of your running back rotation, right? Him and Ty Chandler, and maybe you draft a rookie in the mid to late rounds. Um, but the way we're talking about it, like when I was gaming it out, I was always accounting for the Vikings bringing back Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter, right? Because that's the hardest way to do it. I was accounting for them being able to sign one or two of the bigger free agents on the market. If that doesn't happen, I think you suddenly have a lot of money and you need to spend money on players regardless. Like, that's not to say that you should make bad or negative value investments, but spending a lot of money on an individual player and maybe overpaying a little bit, while it's not the most efficient, can have value in certain circumstances. You can't overpay for everybody, which means you need to hit on draft picks, right? Like, but that's just a prerequisite of being a good team for me. So if we miss out on a Hunter, and then we miss out on a Christian Wilkins, and then we miss out on a Kirk Cousins, right? And we're kind of going to the bargain bin for all of these different things. I would be interested in kind of going into that higher tier, right? If we're able to bring guys back and the Vikings have some pretty critical needs, right? Like I think interior defensive line, like pass rush from the defensive interior, which is something we don't have. I love Harrison Phillips. He doesn't provide that. That's an expensive thing to try to add. Edge rushers are expensive to try to add. A cornerback upgrade potentially, right? Like all of the guys are under contract and they're young, but I mean, did we really want the guys who were starting by the end of last year is the question. Expensive to add. Quarterback, if it's a rookie, not that expensive, but Kirk Cousins, very expensive to have. So a lot of the needs are expensive, which would make running back a luxury. But if they don't feel if they're unable to fill those needs with high priced players, or they don't feel like they need a cornerback or somebody like that, I do get going after a running back. So that's kind of my conditions, right? It'd be super exciting to have a Saquon Barkley, or I really like Josh Jacobs. I've always been a Josh Jacobs fan. I might prefer him over Saquon just based on Saquon's injury history. And Jacobs is a little bit younger, but, with those guys, it would be so exciting to get them. To your point, it's hard to envision spending the money. So it's kind of, I'm torn on that one. So the next question I had, and this is just general, right? We could go position by position, but we're a little bit stretched for time here, so I kind of wanted to go for this. Do you have an individual player? And let's cut out Christian Wilkins from this discussion because I think we'd both love to see him on the team in free agency. Who you want the Vikings to make a splash and go get, like try to pay near top of the market money for? Are there any other free agents that are close to the top of the market that you want to go after?
I mean, it is our theme song that another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And Byron Murphy, I think we could stand to upgrade a lot at the spot opposite him. So I was gonna go for Sneed. I got a need for Sneed.
Oh yeah.
But then the Chiefs went up and tagged
And
him.
it
So
does sound like they're trying to tag and trade him. So, but we'd probably have to spend like our second round pick to do that. So that's kind of the catch there.
yeah, yeah, and I would throw a fourth at him and pay his 20 million or a year, or work out like 100 million over 4 years or something kind of crazy deal for him. I think he's a really good player, and between him and Byron Murphy, the thing is, and with corner, so much of it is dependent on like where schematically where does Brian Flores go from here? Like, because he came up in a lab with this crazy zone blitz defense that nobody else has really done at the NFL level. And when you are playing a zone blitz defense, you don't need to prioritize man cover corners, which is usually like the blue chip guys that you need guys who can
Yeah.
play sticky press man, and like that's what gets you paid at cornerback. Whereas if everybody's only playing zone, then you can field a team of five safeties really, and you don't need to pay any corners. And who cares if you don't backpedal well, or don't your hips don't swivel well, because like if you're playing top down eyes on the quarterback or whatever, for the most part, it's just not as priority of a skill set. So. But at the same time, I think towards the end of the year, we kind of saw it get exposed by a little bit. I don't want to call it simplistic, but they were like a pitcher with two pitches. Like it was Tampa
Yep.
2 or it was cover 3, and like either way, like we got a beater for that one, we got a beater for that one. Like LaFleur kind of figured this out. So, and obviously you can make the zones more complex and you can go from there, or you can try and mix in more man coverage. So if you want to just do more complex zone spot drop zones, like then you don't need to prioritize spending in free, in corner. And you already have Byron Murphy, who's really good and a good, I don't want to say elite, but a good all around cornerback who can kind of do whatever. But if you do want to play more cover one, which is kind of what Brian Flores came up out of and where he had a lot of his success with, you want to mix in some of that old Belichick type stuff, then I do think it does make sense to invest heavily. And if it's not Snead, maybe it's Kendall Fuller or somebody. So that's where I would, if I'm not targeting a pass rusher and I'm not targeting Kirk Cousins or whatever, or I have money left over after one of those things, that's cornerback is where I would want to spend the money. But I also think it's all where does Brian Flores, where's he going from here? Is he just gonna upgrade and make it more complex with his zone blitz system, or is he gonna mix in more of the man covered stuff? So that kind of, it all depends on where they want to go with the scheme. So
Yeah, no, and I think there's just so much value to being able to play man coverage, even if you don't base out of it, that I really do want to get an upgrade there at corner. And, there's potential for the guys on the roster to develop, right? All of them are young players still on their rookie contracts. But at the end of the day, like, we do need to figure something out of that position. And we've talked about it for a few years. Like, eventually, Donatel, his zones got beaten to death, right? And I don't think they were coached very well, but we were scared to play man coverage because our corners couldn't do it. Last year, I think we were a bit scared to play man coverage, even though that's the backbone of what Flores has done. And he was really exciting and did a lot of cool things on the defensive side of the ball. But when push comes to shove, sometimes you just need to play man, right? So I think
like
adding a
on
guy
third
there
down,
is valuable.
you got to play more. You got to play more man on third downs when you're playing like for the sticks. So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of that led to problems on third downs for the Vikings last year because like when they had to play man, they screwed a lot of stuff up and guys couldn't keep up with guys and they didn't have the hip fluidity. So they don't have the horses to run that same kind of cover one stuff. But if they did, not only would it improve their third down efficiency, I think it would improve a lot if you could mix that in on first and second down, and that would, I think, lead to follow-on benefits for the zone blitz type
Yeah.
stuff because now you're not as predictable. So it's the problem is like good cornerbacks don't really hit the market. It's the same way like when I look at the wide receivers on the market, none of these guys are like exciting to me at all. And I think that's just because the NFL isn't letting the good ones hit free agency. So that's what you're seeing with Snead right now too. Snead is a good
Yep.
corner. So
And Jalen Johnson, right? All the other guys have major blemishes. Like they're older, like Kendall Fuller or Stephon Gilmore's really old. And Chidobe Awuzie, this will be his third deal too. Like those are the top 5 in PFF. I just kind of pulled it up behind the 2 that got franchise tagged. For me, the player I'm really excited about, and I don't know, it's interesting because he has a regime change out in Seattle, is Jordan Brooks, who I really like as
oh
a
yeah, yeah,
linebacker.
yeah. Good
I think
call.
he does everything well. He comes forward, he plays coverage. I think Luke Braun's kind of been touting him on his podcast. Shout out to Locked On Vikings. But I think I'm the one who turned Luke Braun on to Jordan Brooks and being like, oh man, Jordan Brooks is actually really, really good. And I think he is a good football player. Like Ivan Pace, I like a lot, but I think he's still going to need to have a limited role. And I think size plays a part of that. And also his coverage ability plays a part of that. Jordan Brooks can physically and mentally do everything you need to ask him in coverage. And while he's only 6 foot tall, he's also 240 pounds and has like 34-inch arms. So he can take on blocks moving forward, and I think he can be very effective as a blitzer. So I think it kind of solves a linebacker question, which also I think helps solidify your zones. Like the linebackers were getting attacked, especially the last couple games. Like Jordan Hicks, once he came back, was getting attacked pretty massively by the Lions in coverage, and that's a major concern for me. I think Pace, like he has the potential to grow, he has the athleticism to be able to do it on the coverage side, but he's not there yet. So I'd rather get a guy who we can plug in and maybe play with 2 linebackers a little bit more, right, than just kind of having one guy on the field. So
Yeah. And Brooks is a. I've been the 2 Seahawks tweeters, Matty F. Brown and C. Mike Spin Move are
yeah,
like
Griff,
big
yeah,
Jordan Brooks proselytizers, and like you see the clips of him like roboting against like in cover 3 or whatever quarters, and he does a fantastic job of it. So like that would completely translate, and also like there are so many like 200-pound linebackers coming at like where are all the big dudes with like the giant pad like those old school linebackers who are like 250 pounds. They're just they're not making them anymore. All our linebackers are these skinny little dudes. So having somebody like Brooks would pair extremely well with pace, and I think that would give you an amazing 1-2 punch at linebacker, which I know is not, that's not the position. It's not the most important position on either side of the ball, but like that's also why you can probably get a player like Brooks, who I think is a very good player, for probably a little bit of a discount. So that would be a really exciting signing.
Yeah, every time somebody was like on the rocks with a team or whatever, see Mike spin move. His name's Griffin, but he pops up and is like, "I want this guy as a Seahawk. Like the Seahawks should look into him." And he's been doing that with Danielle for years. Like he loves Danielle Hunter. So if the Vikings miss out on Danielle Hunter, like which I would be upset, but like to make it up to me, Quasi needs to bring me Jordan Brooks is kind of what I've decided. So
Only fair.
yeah, no. Um, so I don't know. I know you're short on time, Nick. Do you want to go for a little bit more, or do you want to wrap it up?
Maybe just a few more minutes.
Okay, yeah. So one thing I wanted to hit real quick is just the Vikings' overall ability in free agency. We've kind of talked about some of the dynamics with the contracts here with Hunter and Kirk, but the Vikings have, since the cap increased, over $30 million in cap space. Another thing that's notable for the Vikings is in the offseason, there's a top 51 cutoff, which means only the top 51 contracts count against your cap hit. So if you are over that number and you sign a guy, you actually subtract the lowest salary, the lowest cap hit from everybody, which is like $780,000. So every time we sign a guy, his cap hit is actually $780,000 less moving forward, right? As part of what the Vikings are doing. But so they really honestly have a ton of space to be able to work with. And like Harrison Smith, actually, let's move it to that. Harrison Smith, obviously he's 35. He's getting, I believe, $14 million in base salary. You save like $11 million if you cut him. What do you think we should do?
Uh, Maybe you cut him and then you say, obviously we're not paying you this contract.
Yeah.
Maybe you give him like, I'm not saying you say vet minimum or nothing, but he's probably gone. And if he's not, I mean, but that's like, look at the safety market right now. Like everybody's getting cut. So
Yep.
maybe there's a chance you bring him back for very cheap, but clearly he's a cut candidate or a pay cut candidate, and he's not coming back at 20 million with a $20 million cap hit. So yeah, he's
No,
probably
it
gone.
it sucks. I think you have to approach him about a pay cut. He took like a $6 million pay cut last year from the 14 million that his salary is down to like $8 million. I think you can end up going pretty low this year, like in the $4 to $6 million range, which would suck. Like it feels kind of mean to do that to a franchise legend, honestly, right? Like he's a
But like
obvious
he's not as good as he used to be. Like he's
Vikings Ring of
35.
Honor.
Like
Yeah,
it's it used to be like him and Earl Thomas as like the two elite safeties in the NFL, and Earl Thomas has been like retired for like forever now. And like here's Harrison Smith still going strong, and like there's a place for him. Like Flores likes his safeties,
yeah.
and it helps that like Metellus has come on and Bynum's turned out to be a solid contributor. But like there's still a place for Harris. I'm not saying like cut him, say goodbye, and like and the front office does a good job about like not just like ghosting players and freezing them out. And Harrison Smith is a franchise legend. His number will probably be, he's a Ring of Honor player. So, and probably a Hall of Fame player too. I mean, that's another conversation, but an all decades caliber of player, even if he's kind of gotten snubbed for some of those Pro Bowls over his course of his career. So yeah, I think you bring him back for under 5 million a year. And if he doesn't, see if he'll best of luck to him, make as much money as he can. But on this current safety market, I don't think he does. So
Yeah, I mean the number of safeties that got cut, it was like in the same day. It was like 4 or 5 guys who were over
okay.
30 years old. Most of them were still pretty good too. So
Justin Sanders got cut, and he's what,
yeah,
like an all-pro player. So it's kind
yeah.
of nuts.
If Harrison Smith
Paul
gets
Adams.
if he gets put into the open market, I don't think he's making much more than $4 million a year. I don't think he's gonna make more than $4 million a year. Period. If he's in the open market, so I think you can come to a little bit of an agreement, just like they did last year on a reduced contract there for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's it's a tough situation, right? Because not only are you asking a franchise legend to take a pay cut, but also Quasi didn't sign this deal, and it'd be the second year in a row they're asking him to do it, right? So there may be some friction there. But I hope something can get done because, we talked about our cornerback need. It turns out, like, if we get rid of a safety, we either need to get a different safety and move, or we either need to move Josh Metellus to what Harrison Smith was doing and get like a slot corner, right? Which is what Josh Metellus was doing, or we need to get, another safety to do what Harrison Smith was doing. So it just creates a need if he ends up getting cut. And the cap savings are ultimately probably worth it if he doesn't want to take a pay cut at all, but it's just a hard situation.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's going to be the biggest vehicle for the Vikings to be able to create salary cap space, right? Is Harrison Smith. You can also extend Brian O'Neill, but basically the moral of the story is the Vikings can sign whoever they want. They're players for all of these guys in this free agent market with $30 million in cap space. You can always push things into the future. They have very little in commitments in both 2025 and 2026. They have over $100 million currently in 2025. So I think there's a lot of cap room that the Vikings actually have. Do you have anything else on the Vikings cap that you want to say, or is that kind of it?
Probably worth noting that before Wednesday, if the Vikings agree to new terms with Kirk or Hunter, then their future void years don't accelerate. So you save a
Yeah.
little bit of cap space before you factor in the new contract. Like with Kirk, you save, what is it, 18 million? You see 18 and a
Yeah,
quarter
it's 18
million if
million.
you agree to a new deal. Now, obviously, if you're paying him $40 million, you're still increasing your total cap hit by 22 million. But it does defer some of the future dead cap hits. And the same thing with Hunter, although a smaller number. I think it's 7 million left or 7.5
Yeah, it's about seven and
with
a half.
his bonus that is currently prorated to 2025. It accelerates if they don't agree to a new deal. And that's, by the way, if they let the contract void, you can't undo that. So there's a little bit of a deadline. Like that's kind of a hard deadline, and not in addition to the fact that other teams can agree to a new deal as soon as he hits free agency. It also, like, the Vikings can't get that dead cap back, or can't, if they re-sign him, even if they let him walk after Wednesday, that dead cap is still going to be accelerated to 2024. So something to keep in mind. Like, if they don't have a new deal with Cousins and Hunter by Wednesday morning, I think that both of those guys are gone. So
Yeah, and that's definitely the hard part of it. Like, there are ways to do it, right? You can give a minimum salary and then give signing bonuses, and then you put yourself right back into the situation you're in, right, where you've accelerated dead cap hits out in the future, which is fine because that's a negative interest loan, right? Is the best way I've heard it described. Is
yeah.
look, the cap's only going up. The cap went up by $12 million more than we expected it to, and we expected it to go up a lot. Like, it's something like 150% of what it was like 3 years ago, right? So for every $2 you were spending 3 years ago, you can spend $3 now, right? And it's the same relative cap hit. So I do think, there is value in pushing that into the future, but having to commit to pushing that into the future after their contract's void is the real killer, I think. Like, it's something Quasey talked about actually with Anthony Barr, right, the year before, where it was like, after we hit this void date, it's really difficult to bring him back just because of the total cap hit that he has. So
Yeah,
it'll be a difficult thing to do, and I think we'll kind of know the future of our franchise by that point in time.
totally.
So, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up here. A little bit of a quicker episode today, but hopefully it gave you a little bit of a primer just in kind of what we want the Vikings to do moving forward into free agency, right? We didn't get into the nitty gritty of every little thing. But the thing is, like, I can say, oh, I want them to sign this receiver. I want them to sign this interior offensive lineman, this linebacker. Like, I can solve all of the problems, and they're not going to do that, right? So, like, it's kind of a catch
Matt,
22 talking about it.
Matt, I love how we like go into the nitty gritty of the cap and like the specific fits and like Jordan Brooks fit, like the Brian Flores scheme where it goes from there, almost an hour, and you're like, so this was kind of a lighter episode, like we're not getting too crazy. It's like,
Yeah,
which is
well,
good, like goals. We set a high bar for ourselves, so
yeah, we were
I,
we were
I love
trending in the hour and a half realm typically, so a little bit of a shorter episode, about half that amount of time. But no, it was great getting back talking to you. We will be back after free agency happens, right? Kind of recap the move, break down anybody new that comes to the Minnesota Vikings. We'll try to get onto the tape, or I'll at least try to get onto the tape for sure. I know Nick's been extremely busy, so we'll see if that happens. But yeah, I'm Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. He's Nick Olson. You can find him at Nick Olson NFL. Our co-host Greg, I think he's just on Instagram at the Gregg Blake or something like that. I'm trying to get that right. We are at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. You can find Kindred Skulls on YouTube. We're also on any podcast platform you look for, iTunes. Well, I guess Apple Music podcasts. I probably should correct that as well. I always say it wrong. Spotify. YouTube Music, which is what I use to listen to my podcasts. So you can get us anywhere you can find us. And with that, Skol Vikings.
I will love you.
Goal, baby.
Another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.